Imagine for a second, right, that a major network, let's just say HBO, spends hundreds of millions of dollars to resurrect the most beloved, financially successful fantasy franchise in modern history.
Oh, just a small, totally pressure-free project.
Right, exactly. So they gather the executives, they hire the showrunners, build all these massive sets, and they finally drop the highly anticipated teaser trailer for a brand new television adaptation of Harry Potter.
Right.
And the number one reaction from the most diehard fans on the internet isn't, excitement. It's not unbridled joy. It isn't even outrage over casting, which is...
Yeah, that's the standard internet reaction.
Totally. But instead, it is a massive group of teenagers and young adults immediately downloading the official trailer into basic video editing apps on their phone just to crank up the brightness and the exposure so they can actually see what is happening on the screen.
It is a genuinely absurd scenario when you say it out loud like that.
It's ridiculous.
But that is exactly the cultural moment we find ourselves in right now. It's this collision of massive corporate legacy, modern technological pipeline, and a completely fractured fan base.
And that collision is exactly what we are unpacking today on Dive, because we have a really fascinating stack of source material to get.
We really do.
We're looking at a very specific, highly critical piece of commentary from the channel Pop Culture Critic. And they recently broke down this newly released HBO Harry Potter trailer.
Right. And doing so, they drew heavily on a rather scathing article, like really scathing, published in The Spectator by Christina Marquette.
Yeah, she did not hold back. But, the reason we are doing a deep dive into this today isn't just to talk about wizard or like magic wands or Hogwarts house scarves.
No, we're going a lot deeper than the merch.
Exactly. Our mission today is to explore what this trailer and the intense reaction to it reveal about our current cultural moment. We're going to examine the state of modern entertainment, this pervasive feeling of cultural stagnation, and honestly, the very literal physical darkness that seems to be just swallowing modern television.
Yeah, and whether you consider yourself a lifelong fan of this franchise who, attended the midnight book releases in a cloak.
Which, no shame. Those were great.
No shame at all. Or if you're just a casual observer of pop culture dynamics, this analysis from our sources is essentially a masterclass in dissecting modern Hollywood.
It really is.
It's a real-time look at an industry desperately struggling to recapture lightning in a bottle and a fan base that is simultaneously demanding the past while rejecting how it's being repackaged to them.
I want to start by throwing a word out there to you, the listener, and I want you to really think about how it feels when you hear it. The word is nostalgia.
Nostalgia?
Yeah. Because usually in modern marketing, nostalgia is sold to us as this warm blanket, right? It's a fuzzy feeling, a fond memory of childhood, a comfortable retreat.
It's usually the ultimate comfort.
Right. But there's a detail in Marquette's article that totally reframes this concept, and honestly, it blew my mind when I read it. The word nostalgia actually comes from two Greek roots.
Okay, lay some etymology on us.
I'm going to. The first root is nostos, which means homecoming, and the second is algos, which means pain.
Wait, pain, really?
Yes. So etymologically speaking, nostalgia does not mean a happy memory. It literally translates to the pain of homesickness. It is an active ache for something that is definitively lost.
That is, wow, it's a striking definition.
Yeah.
And applying that lens completely shifts how you view our modern entertainment.
It really does, right?
Yeah, because when we see this endless parade of reboots, remakes, and legacy sequels, it's not just a joyous celebration of the past. It's a symptom of a kind of collective cultural grief.
Ooh, collective cultural grief. I like that.
Well, we are looking at a society experiencing algo, a painful longing for a home, or in this case, an era of culture that we can't actually return to.
And that definition of pain and homesickness is the perfect launchpad for our first major question today, which is, why are audiences so incredibly desperate for a return to Hogwarts right now?
Right.
The analysis from Pop Culture Critic, pulling from Marquette, offers a pretty sharp critique. Marquette claims that this new Harry Potter property is fundamentally aimed at, and this is her quote, infantilized millennial. Yeah, she went there. And there's this one standout line from her article that the commentators latch onto. She writes, "Who cares if it's good as long as it's familiar?"
Who cares if it's good as long as it's familiar? I mean, that quote is the diagnostic anchor for their entire argument.
It really hits the nail on the head.
It does. And the commentators build on this to suggest that we are currently living through a massive, unprecedented cultural drought. Let's look at the timeline they provide to back this up.
Okay, let's do it.
So, Harry Potter absolutely dominated the global cultural zeitgeist from around 1997 or 1998, when the books first started taking over the world, all the way through to 2011, when the final film, The Deathly Hallows Part 2, hit theaters.
Right, which is well over a decade.
Over a decade of a true monoculture. But their argument is that since 2011, there simply haven't been any equivalent franchises that have captured the global imagination in that exact same foundational way.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second, because my immediate thought when I read that and this was, what about Marvel? What about Star Wars? Didn't they dominate the 20s?
That's the obvious counter, yeah. But the commentators actually run through the list of these big contenders and they methodically knock them down.
How so?
Well, they argue that the Star Wars franchise, particularly under Disney's recent stewardship, has largely faded. It has lost its universal, unquestioned grip on the public imagination.
Okay, fair enough. The sequel trilogy definitely split the fan.
Exactly. And then the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, which undeniably had a massive run peaking around Avengers. Endgame is currently struggling to maintain relevance with its newer faces.
Yeah, that's true. People are definitely feeling superhero fatigue.
Right. And then they mentioned the Hunger Games. Now, the Hunger Games was huge.
Oh, massive. Everyone read those books.
Right. It was a massive phenomenon that came out right around the time the Harry Potter films were wrapping up.
Yeah.
But the commentators point out something crucial. They say it didn't leave the same lasting cultural footprint.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, it didn't have that lingering, decades-long side effect where people are still, sorting themselves into districts the way they sort themselves into Hogwarts houses on social media today.
Oh, you are totally right. Nobody puts District 12 in their bio anymore, but people still put Proud Hufflepuff everywhere.
Exactly. That is the defining difference. Harry Potter wasn't just a series of movies you watched.
Yeah.
It became a pervasive identity marker for an entire generation. And if we connect this timeline of franchises to the bigger picture, it explains the sheer desperation for nostalgia, right? The commentators are observing a generation of young people coming of age, the demographic that historically creates the new defining culture. But the pervasive feeling is that there actually is no new culture being created at that massive unifying scale.
There are just no new foundational franchises for people to collectively fall in love with at the exact same time.
Right.
I was trying to think of a way to describe this feeling, and it's almost like you're standing in front of your refrigerator late at night, and it's full of nothing but leftovers from 3 days ago.
That's a great analogy.
Right. You keep taking out the same plastic containers, reheating the same meal over and over again, not because it's a Michelin-starred dinner, but because nobody is cooking anything new in the kitchen.
You're just hungry.
Exactly. It's sustenance, but it's not fresh. But I do have to ask, is it really that nobody is cooking anything new? Or is it just that the kitchen has gotten so massive and fragmented that we can't agree on what's for dinner anymore?
Oh, that's the streaming era in a nutshell.
Right. The streaming era has shattered the monoculture. We used to all go to the midnight book releases together. Now 10 million people might watch a brilliant new sci-fi show on Apple TV, and another 10 million watch a gritty drama on Netflix, and those two groups never overlap.
That is a phenomenal point. The fragmentation of media means that a Harry Potter-level cultural dominance might actually be statistically impossible to achieve today. The attention economy is just too divided.
We're all in our own little algorithms.
Right. But regardless of why it's happening, the emotional result is exactly the same. Audiences are craving the familiar. They're looking backward because the present landscape feels barren of unifying magic.
Yeah.
They want the leftover. But here is the inherent tragedy of nostalgia. Going back to that pain definition, we are acutely aware that they are leftovers.
Which leads us perfectly into the central tension of this entire deep dive. If audiences are so culturally starved, and they are so deeply desperate for the comfort of nostalgia, why is there such an intense, immediate backlash against this new HBO trailer?
That's the paradox.
Why are they rejecting the very thing they want? And this is where the source material wades into some highly contentious territory regarding how modern lenses warp classic.
Yeah, a major friction point raised in these critiques is the collision of a beloved 1990s property with modern Hollywood sensibility. The commentators argue that these classic properties are increasingly being infused with what they perceive as a modern social agenda, and they claim this infusion fundamentally alters the original material.
And they point to very specific casting and production choices as evidence shift, right? For instance, the discourse surrounding the potential for, quote, race swaps in the new series.
Right.
They specifically cite the online debates about casting a black actor to play Snape. And just to be clear, we're impartially reporting what the source discusses here. The argument presented in the source is that injecting current real-world cultural and political debates into the established lore of a fantasy world break.
That's their main issue.
Yeah, they feel it shatters the childhood connection fiction for the fans because it forcibly anchors a magical escape to the mundane reality.
But what I found particularly fascinating about this specific source material is that it provides a very sharp counterpoint to its own primary argument.
Oh, I loved this part.
Right. One of the commentators actually stops the conversation to push back against the people who blindly romanticize the pure entertainment of old versus the corrupted entertainment of new.
Yeah, they actually check themselves.
They do.
Yeah.
They make the incredibly valid point that older entertainment, the movies, television shows, and books from the 90s and 2000s actually contained plenty of modern liberalism, progressivism, and political messaging.
Yes. I love that they admitted that because it is historically true. If you go back and actually read the original Harry Potter book, themes of class warfare, prejudice, government corruption, and resistance movements are woven into the very fabric of the narrative. It was always political. So if the old stuff is political too, what is the actual difference? Why does it feel so intrusive to the audience? And the answer the source arrives at is brilliant. The real difference isn't the media. The difference is the audience.
Exactly. The commentator argues that back when we first consumed these stories, the audience was younger. We weren't politically active. Our brains, to use their exact phrasing, weren't saddled with all of the baggage of caring about real-world politics, gender dynamics, or complex social issues.
We were just kids.
Right. We just saw a story about good fighting evil.
It's the baggage of adulthood. We grew up. And it's not just that our brains changed, our access to information changed completely. The source makes this fantastic point about the mystery of the actors.
The loss in the parasocial mystery.
Yeah. Back in 2001, when the first movie came out, you didn't know what Daniel Radcliffe or Emma Watson thought about tax policy or foreign affairs. You didn't have 2047 access to their personal thoughts, their daily routines, or their political leanings on a smartphone in your pocket.
There was a hard wall of separation between the performer and the art. There was mystique.
And the destruction of that mystique through social media and constant connectivity has fundamentally altered parasocial relations. Now, you know the politics of the lead actor, you know the personal controversies of the showrunner, you know the corporate strategy of the studio funding the project.
It's just too much information.
It is. The commentators describe this as the ultimate loss of wonder. When you know exactly how the sausage is made and you know the personal flaws of the butcher, it is nearly impossible to just enjoy the meal.
Hyper-awareness destroys the magic of escapism. You can't just watch the magic trick anymore. You are constantly hyper-fixated on the string.
So it brings up this slightly tragic realization. Has modern media actually changed that much, or did we just lose our innocence?
It's a tough pill to swallow.
To illustrate just how long it has been since these commentators felt that pure, unburdened, string-free anticipation for media, one of them notes that the last time they watched a trailer and felt genuine, baggage-free excitement was for Batman v Superman and the sequel to Sicario.
Wow.
And they point out that those trailers dropped back in 2018.
2018. That is an eternity in pop culture years.
It really is.
It highlights a deep, pervasive fatigue. But while this metaphorical darkness, the baggage, the loss of innocence, the hyper-awareness is a massive part of the cultural critique, the source material pivots to spend a massive amount of time talking about a very literal physical darkness.
Oh, this is where it gets crazy.
Yeah, this is where the technical critique of the new HBO trailer gets incredibly specific and, frankly, quite baffling.
Right, because we aren't just talking about a dark tone or mature themes. We are talking about the fact that you literally cannot.
You are squinting at your monitor.
The dominant technical critique leveled against the Harry Potter teaser trailer by Pop Christ is its color grade. They describe the aesthetic as sterile, muted, and completely washed out.
Yeah, they go so far as to compare the visual tone of a whimsical, magical fantasy series about children learning to fly on broomsticks to a depressing crime documentary.
Which is such a wild pivot. It is a massive visual pivot from the source material. And to be fair to the critics, they acknowledge that the original film franchise did get darker over time.
They did, yeah.
They make a very sharp observation about how the Warner Brothers logo at the start of the movie tracked this matches that.
Actually, yeah. In the first film, the logo was bright, golden, and soaring through the clouds.
It's beautiful.
But by the final films, it is rusted, tarnished, and emerging from storm clouds. The aesthetic matched the increasingly dire state.
But the commentators make this hilarious yet totally valid joke about it. They point out that this new HBO series is starting out visually dark Sorcerer's Stone.
Right, the first book.
Yeah. And remember, the Sorcerer's Stone is supposed to be the brightest, most wondrous, awe-inspiring introduction to this magical world. Harry is escaping the Dursleys and seeing magic for the first time.
It should be visually dazzling.
Exactly. So they joke that if it starts this dark in year 1, by the time the series reaches the Half-Blood Prince in season 6, the screen is just going to be completely pitch black.
Like zero visibility.
They literally said it's going to function as an audiobook. You'll just be staring at a blank screen listening to Wand because there will be absolutely no light left.
And this phenomenon is not isolated to Hogwarts, unfortunately. The commentators pull in another highly anticipated recent release to prove that this is an industry-wide epidemic of muted colors.
Oh, the Wicked trailers.
Yes, they point to the trailers for the upcoming Wicked film. Now, if there is any property on Earth famously associated with vibrant, saturated color, it is Wicked.
Oh, 100%.
It is defined by its vivid emerald greens and stark contrasting pink.
It's the Emerald City. It's supposed to be an assault on the eyes in the best possible way.
Exactly. But according to the source's analysis, the Wicked trailers look incredibly flat and washed out. One commentator observes that the lighting makes it look as though they're trying to shoot a magical, vibrant scene in the middle of a barren, dusty desert.
It's like someone put a beige Instagram filter over Oz.
Yeah, the potential for vivid, magical color is completely wasted in favor of a desaturated, quote-unquote, realistic aesthetic that just looks drab.
And this is the moment in the deep dive where one of the commentators drops my absolute favorite, most unexpected detail.
The high point of television.
Yes. They are lamenting the death of good color grading and vivid lighting, and they pinpoint what they consider to be the absolute pinnacle, the high point of television light. It's not some prestige HBO drama from the golden age. It's not Mad Men or Breaking Bad.
Right.
It's old episodes of CSI Miami.
It is a brilliant, highly specific reference that perfectly illustrates their frustration.
I was dying laughing when I read it, but they are entirely serious, and they're completely right. They talk about how CSI Miami was just relentlessly, unapologetically bathed in these intense, saturated oranges and greens.
It was so vibrant.
It was full of deliberate, stylized lens flares and high-contrast light refract. And they mentioned this incredible practical lighting trick, the crew. Have you heard about this?
A water trick?
Yeah. When filming an exterior shot on a regular street, the crew would actively spray the ground with water. They would hose down the pavement, even if it wasn't raining in the scene, just so the asphalt would reflect the sunlight and add a textured, glistening layer of light to the shot.
That CSI Miami example is crucial because it highlights the concept of intentionality.
Intentionality, right.
The crew used practical, deliberate environmental choices to construct a very specific visual identity. It wasn't realistic, quote-unquote, but it was visually arresting.
It looked like a comic book.
Yeah. And the commentator's deep frustration is that modern high-budget productions seem to have completely abandoned these deliberate, practical techniques in favor of a homogenized digital dark. I mean, why bother wetting the pavement to catch the sun if the post-production team is just going to apply a digital gray filter over the entire scene anyway?
It defeats the whole purpose. And I want you, the listener, to think about your own viewing habits over the last few years. How many times have you been watching a supposedly high-budget, premium streaming show, maybe a massive dragon fantasy, or a gritty sci-fi epic, and you've had to grab your remote, pause the show, and mess with your television's brightness or contrast setting just to figure out what was happening in a night scene?
We've all done it.
It happens constantly. We are watching the most expensive television ever made, and we literally cannot see it, which forces us to ask the million-dollar question, why?
That is the question.
Why are creators, directors, and showrunners making this specific, deliberate vision, especially when it universally frustrates their...
And this is where the source material does some genuinely impressive investigative. To understand the why, they focus on a very specific shot from the new HBO trailer, a brief glimpse inside the potions class.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So in the trailer, this room is incredibly dark. It's shrouded in deep shadows with barely any ambient light. Now, initially, some defenders of the trailer argued online, well, the potions classroom is in the dungeons of the castle. Logically, it should be dark.
Which, on the surface, sounds like a perfectly reasonable defense of realism. It's a dungeon. Dungeons are dark.
Right. But the commentators noticed a massive discrepancy. On the exact same day that HBO dropped the official teaser trailer, they also released a short behind-the-scenes featurette showing the making of the teaser.
Oh, they slipped up.
They really did. Because in that behind-the-scenes footage, the actual physical set of the potions classroom was fully visible and it was brightly lit. Yeah, there were massive studio lights illuminating the space. You could see the textures of the stone, the labels on the bottles, the details of the set design clearly.
They caught them red-handed. The darkness was a lie. This definitively proves that the darkness in the trailer was not a practical limitation.
No, not at all.
It wasn't a limitation of the camera lenses. It was a choice. It was added intentionally after the fact in post-production. And to understand how they do this, we need to talk about log files.
Ah, yes. Yes, the log files.
The source explains that when these massive shows are filmed, the digital cinema cameras capture the footage in raw data form, often referred to as shooting in log. If you have ever looked at a raw log file straight out of a RED or ARI camera, the image looks incredibly flat, desaturated, and gray.
Right, and it's vital to understand why they shoot that way in the first place. Log files are designed to preserve the maximum amount of dynamic range.
So what does that mean for the average?
Well, it means the digital sensor retains the mathematical data for both the absolute darkest shadows and the absolute brightest highlights in the frame without losing detail in either extreme.
Oh, okay, so it's capturing everything.
Exactly. By shooting a flat, gray image, the production is essentially giving the colorist in the digital intermediate, or DI suite, the ultimate freedom to push the color, the contrast, and the brightness in whatever direction the director wants later on.
Think of it like a lump of wet, unbaked clay. When the footage is captured in log, it's completely malleable. You have the total freedom to mold it. You can make it vibrant, you can make it neon, you could make it look exactly like the saturated orange hues of CSI Miami if you wanted to.
We really could.
So the fact that the final product is dark and muted means that someone looked at that malleable, data-rich clay and deliberately chose to bake it gray.
They wanted it that way.
It is a baffling creative. So why make that choice? Why choose gray?
The source material breaks down 3 distinct theories for why this post-production darkening has become a ubiquitous industry standard. The first theory, and the one the commentators find by far the most plausible, is that the darkness is a masking technique.
Hiding something.
Yeah. They argue that heavily darkening a scene is the cheapest, most effective way to hide bad, average, or rushed CGI.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that. How does darkness hide bad CGI? If you think about visual effect, the hardest things to render convincingly are lighting interact, shadow fall off, and the physical integration of a digital object, real-world environment.
Lighting is everything.
Right. If you light a scene brightly, the audience can clearly see the edges of a digital creature. They can see if the texture resolution is low. They can see if the digital lighting doesn't perfectly match the practical lighting.
It exposes all the flaws.
But if you crush the black levels and blanket the entire scene in shadow, you obscure all of those digital imperfections. The shadows hide the polygon edges. If the audience can't clearly see the effects, they can't critique how fake it is.
Precise. And if this theory is true, it is a massive indictment of the modern visual effects pipeline.
It really is.
We know from industry reports that VFX artists are constantly overworked, facing brutal crunch times and shrinking budgets. The decision to darken the screen might not be a stylistic choice born of artistic vision. It might be a desperate survival tactic by studios trying to meet impossible release deadlines without their digital seams showing.
That makes total sense, but it's incredibly depressing to think about.
It is.
The source, however, doesn't stop there. They mention a second theory, which is where the deep dive sharp turn into the conceptual and slight. They bring up the concept of predictive programming.
Yes, predictive programming. Now, the idea of predictive programming in this specific context suggests that Hollywood is intentionally making media visually dark, muted, and depressing in order to psychologically condition the public.
Whoa. Okay.
The theory posits that by constantly bombarding audiences with bleak, desaturated, low-visibility entertainment, the media is subtly encouraging a sense of gloom, lethargy, and compliance in society.
Now, to be completely fair to our source material, the commentators themselves immediately walk this back.
Yeah, they do.
They admit this is a bit too far down the rabbit hole for them to fully endorse. They don't genuinely believe there is a shadowy, cigar-smoking cabal of color graders sitting in a boardroom actively trying to ruin the psychological well-being of society through contrast slight.
That would be a wild conspiracy.
But the fact that the theory even exists and that people talk about it speaks to how alienated audiences feel by this aesthetic, which leads to the third and perhaps the most frustrating theory, sheer incompetence.
Yes. The incompetence theory. This one suggests that the modern post-production pipeline is simply broken.
How so?
Well, with remote work, siloed departments, and massive corporate hierarchies, the theory argues there is a general lack of cohesive skill, care, or communication.
The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is.
Yeah, exactly. The lighting department lights the set one way, the VFX department renders it another way, and the colorist is given conflicting notes from 6 different executives, resulting in a muddy, incoherent final image.
But the commentators push back on this slightly, and I agree. We are talking about the flagship production for HBO Max. We are talking about a property worth billions of dollars.
This isn't a student.
Right. With the massive scale, the unlimited budget, and the sheer talent available to a production side, simple incompetence shouldn't be an insurmountable hurdle. The digital tools are too advanced, and the resources are too vast for...
Which leads to the inescapable conclusion, it almost has to be deliberate.
It has to be.
For whatever reason, whether it's to mask CGI, chase a misguided notion of prestige realism or match a grittier corporate mandate. They want it to look like. And this earthly, muted, stripped-down aesthetic isn't just limited to the lighting and color grading.
No, it's everywhere.
The source observes that this philosophy has bled into the fundamental design language of the new series, and they spent a considerable amount of time analyzing the redesign of the HBO Harry Potter logo.
The visual critique of the logo is fascinating because it perfectly mirrors the critique. If you remember the original film logo from the 2000s, it was iconic.
It was everywhere.
It had this shimmery metallic vibrance. It looked like it was forged from solid gold or silver. It looked inherently magical. But the commentators note that the new HBO logo has been completely redesigned to be much more earthly, grounded, and frankly, dull.
Dull is the right word. They break down very specific design choices to prove this point.
Yeah.
The Hogwarts crest used in the new branding focuses heavily on imagery of trees, roots, and earth.
Like it's carved out of a tree.
Exactly. The typography has changed. The letter T in the word Potter has been altered to look distinctly like a physical wooden brand.
And the commentators are fair here. They acknowledge that from a pure lore perspective, wands are made of wood. The Forbidden Forest is a massive part of the story, so leaning into an earthly wooden theme makes a certain kind of logical sense on paper.
Sure, you can justify it.
But they argue that the execution of that idea completely strips away the vibrance. The metallic shine is gone. It just looks flat, like a matte painting of a...
And this profound disconnect between what the corporate creators are designing and what the hardcore fans actually want to see has led to a fascinating modern phenomenon. Immediate, crowdsourced fan friction and amateur correction.
Fans doing it themselves.
Yeah. The source references a specific online content creator who goes by Hendel ASMR Week. This creator took the new, earthly, muted HBO logo and decided to edit it himself.
And according to the commentators, Hendel's amateur edit looks drastically better than the multi-million-dollar official corporate version.
Crazy.
He essentially went into his editing software, added metallic textures, introduced dynamic lighting and specular highlights, and made the logo look like a physical, shining cauldron.
It popped.
He managed to keep the new earthly, branch-like shapes that HBO designed, but he restored that missing magical vibrance. He made it look like Harry.
And this instinct to fix the official mark didn't stop with just the logo. Fans also took raw, dark stills from the teaser trailer and ran them through basic, off-the-shelf color correction software.
Oh, this everywhere on Twitter.
It was. The commentators point out that in the official trailer release, beloved characters like Hermione and Snape were practically invisible. They were completely swallowed by the crushed shadows and gray tone.
But as soon as fans boosted the exposure and tweaked the color balance, the images completely transform. You could actually see the intricate details of the cost depth sets.
It's like a night and day.
It is absolutely wild to think that a fan sitting in their bedroom with a laptop and basic editing is essentially doing the job of a premium post-production house, and arguably better, at least in terms of delivering what the audience
The commentators mock new corporate aesthetics so mercilessly that they make a rather brilliant comparison.
Oh, the AI video comparison?
Yes. They argue that the dark, muted, low-contrast vibe of the HBO trailer feels less like a cinematic event and more like those 5-hour AI-generated ambience videos on YouTube.
Oh my gosh, I know exactly what you mean. The video is titled Cozy Slytherin Common Room with Rain Sounds or Fireplace ASMR. People put them on their TVs as background noise while they study or sleep.
Exactly. The source argues that the trailer has the same sterile, algorithmically generated, low engagement feel. It feels like background noise designed not to offend the eyes, rather than an exciting, dynamic fantasy adventure designed to capture the imagination.
Right.
And this observation brings up a really critical dynamic within the fandom itself, the tension between the critics who demand better and the die-hard fans who accept whatever they are given.
The commentators are genuinely baffled by the reaction of some prominent fan accounts on social media. They describe seeing these massive fan influencers posting reaction videos where they are literally crying tears of joy, applauding and cheering for a trailer that the commentators themselves deem to be, quote, trash.
It loops perfectly back to that definition of nostalgia and cultural starvation we discussed at the very beginning.
On algos.
Right. HBO isn't blind to this. They are actually using those specific reaction videos of fans crying as official promotional material.
That's so cynical.
It is. The commentators are basically looking at these fans and saying, you are applauding the absolute bare minimum. You are crying over a dark screen and a wooden font simply because it reminds you of a time when you were happy.
It's the leftovers metaphor again. You are so starved that you are weeping over a cold slice.
That's exactly it.
But in the spirit of fairness, and to accurately reflect the source material, The commentators weren't entirely 100%. Amidst all the brutal critiques of lighting, agendas, and logos, there was one specific moment in the trailer that actually broke through their cynicism. We have to mention the silver line.
Yes, there was a silver lining. There was one specific fleeting shot in the trailer that the commentators genuinely praised. It was a shot clearly designed to visually represent a mother's love.
Specifically Lily Potter's.
Right, the sacrificial love of Lily Potter that famously protected Harry, a love he never consciously knew, but that completely defined his existence.
And when they saw that shot, the commentators actually conceded that the creators nailed the emotional beat. They essentially said, okay, good, you guys understood that part.
They gave credit where it was due.
And I think this proves a really profound point about fandoms and critics. Even the harshest, most cynical critics are willing to give credit when the emotional core of the source material is respected.
Absolutely.
It proves that the backlash isn't just about hating everything new out of spite. It's about a desperate desire for the essence of the story to be revered and protected.
Which provides a flawless transition into the final and perhaps the most granular, microscopic critique raised by the source material.
Oh boy, the detail to end all.
If respecting the intricate details of the lore is paramount to these fans, there is one visual detail in this franchise that is absolutely non-negotiable. It is baked into the text from page 1. And the new HBO series appears to have already fumbled it in the very first teaser.
The continuity of Harry Potter's eye color.
The eye color.
This is where fan obsession reaches an almost forensic level. The source points out that the new young actor cast to play Harry Potter, a boy named Dominic, clearly has blue eyes in the teaser trailer.
Very clearly blue.
Now, to a casual viewer, that might mean absolutely nothing. But to a fan, this observation triggers a massive deep dive into the incredibly complicated, deeply frustrating history of eye color in this franchise.
Let's establish the baseline lore for anyone who might not know. In the original books written by J.K. Rowling, it is an absolutely foundational, undeniable piece of the narrative architecture that Harry has his mother's bright, almond-shaped green eyes.
It is repeated constantly.
It isn't just a physical description. It is a major recurring plot point. It is the visual anchor for his deeply complicated, ultimately tragic relationship with Severus Snape.
Right?
Snape looks at Harry, hates him because he looks exactly like his father, James Potter, but is haunted by him because he has Lily's green eye. The entire emotional climax of their arc relies on this visual fact.
It is essential. But as anyone who has watched the original movies knows, Daniel Radcliffe, the actor who famously played Harry, had bright blue eyes.
Not green at all.
The commentators use this new trailer to explain the fascinating, chaotic, behind-the-scenes history of how that happened. Because originally, back in 2000, the production team fully intended to be at 100% lore accurate. They had special green contact lenses made for Daniel Radcliffe to wear.
They really tried.
And in fact, the very first scene they ever filmed for the Sorcerer's Stone, which, in a weird quirk of scheduling, was actually the final scene of the movie, where Harry is saying goodbye to Hagrid and getting on the Hogwarts Express to go home, was shot with Radcliffe wearing those green contacts.
But they immediately ran into a massive biological problem. Radcliffe was highly allergic to the material in the contact lenses.
Oh, poor kid.
Yeah. If you go back right now, pull up the Sorcerer's Stone, and watch that specific train scene closely, you can clearly see that his eyes are incredibly red, bloodshot, and watery. He was having a severe allergic reaction while trying to act.
The producers and the director, Chris Columbus, quickly realized they were facing an impossible situation. They were looking at a decade-long production schedule spanning 7 books, and they realized they simply could not force a young child to endure a painful allergic reaction every single day on set for 10 years.
No, you can't do that.
So they made the practical, humane decision. They abandoned the contact. Radcliffe kept his natural blue eyes, and they decided they would just have to cast an actress to play Lily Potter, who also had blue eyes, so the "you have your mother's eyes" line would still make sense contextually.
What's incredibly interesting, as the commentators point out, is that the studio was initially so committed to the green eye that some of the very first waves of promotional merchandise posters, action figures, lunchboxes were actually put through post-production to digitally change Radcliffe's eyes to green.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. But eventually the sheer volume of material is too much and they just gave up on it for the film.
And this history lesson is exactly why the commentators are so incredibly frustrated by the news. They are watching history repeat itself, but they argue that the context has completely changed.
Their core argument here is rooted in the massive advancement of technology. They fully acknowledge the physical and practical challenges the original production faced 25 years ago. But they argue that in 2026, those excuses simply do not hold up.
Not at all.
First, they point out that contact lens technology has vastly improved. There are countless new brands, new breathable materials, and custom-fitting technique, making it highly unlikely that the new actor couldn't find a tolerable green lens.
And even if he couldn't wear contacts, let's say he has the exact same allergy, just for the sake of argument, the digital technology available today is light years ahead of where it was in 2000.
It's not even a comparison.
The commentators argue that with modern algorithmic editing, AI-assisted tracking, and advanced compositing in programs like DaVinci Resolve or After Effects, you could digitally track and change his eye color to green in post-production almost.
It's literally a few clicks now.
You wouldn't have to rotoscope every frame by hand like they did back then. The computer can lock onto the pupil and perfectly integrate the color, accounting for lighting and shadow flawless.
So if the technology is cheap, accessible, and flawless, the fact that HBO is still presenting a blue-eyed Harry in the promotional material feels, to the commentators, like a deliberate, almost arrogant refusal to honor the text.
Right.
It feels like the studio is saying, we know what the book says, but we just don't care enough to fix it.
And this frustration over the blue eyes is compounded tenfold by the fact that the original films already botched this specific piece of lore in the most spectacular, catastrophic way possible.
Oh, the continuity error.
Yes. The source goes on a highly passionate rant about a massive continuity error in the final film, The Deathly Hallows Part.
It is the moment that broke the immersion for millions of fans. As we established, the entire emotional climax of Snape's arc, his dying breath, relies on the famous line, "You have your mother's eyes."
Heartbreaking scene.
Right. And the films established early on that Harry, played by Radcliffe, had blue eyes. And the actress they cast to play adult Lily Potter, Geraldine Somerville, had blue eyes. So far, the continuity holds within the movie universe.
But then we get to the flashbacks, where we see Snape and Lily as children at Hogwarts. The production cast a young actress to play child Lily, and the commentators point out the disastrous oversight. The child actress had dark, piercing brown eyes.
How do you miss that?
I have no idea. So you have a timeline where young Lily has brown eyes, older Lily has blue eyes, and Harry has blue eyes. The continuity is completely shattered.
It completely undermines the emotional resonance of the central narrative. When Snape says, "You have your mother's eyes," the audience is actively distracted by the biological impossibility they just witnessed on screen a few minutes prior.
It takes you right out of the movie.
Yeah. If we connect this hyperfixation on eye color back to the broader theme of our deep dive, it reveals something vital about the relationship between modern media conglomerates and obsessive fandoms. Ignoring a detail as simple yet narratively crucial as eye color sends a powerful negative signal to the fan base.
It's a signal that says the creators view this property as a product to be managed, not a mythology. It suggests a lack of care for the intricate details that the fans hold so incredible. It's the little things that break. And when the spell breaks, all you are left with is the dark lighted branch.
It's true. Once the trust is gone, everything gets scrutinized.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We have dug deep into the psychology of fandom, the technical realities of Hollywood, and the cultural shifts of the last. Let's do a quick recap to pull all these complex threads together.
Let's do it.
We started by redefining nostalgia, moving away from the idea of a warm memory and embracing the literal Greek translation, algos, the pain of homesickness. We explored the idea of a modern cultural drought, where the fragmentation of the streaming era has left us without new, monumental monoculture franchise, leaving audiences desperately, painfully craving the familiar leftovers of the past.
Right. And from there, we examined the complex debate around the baggage of modern media. We looked at how the loss of audience innocence, the destruction of celebrity mystique through 24/7 social media access, and the hyper-awareness of modern production have stripped away the pure, unburdened wonder we used to feel, leaving us highly critical and suspicious of new iterations of old.
We then pulled back the curtain on the literal, physical darkening of television. We talked about sterile, muted color grading, the loss of deliberate practical lighting techniques like wetting the pavement in CSI Miami, and the baffling post-production choice to take dynamic, raw log files and intentionally bake them into a depressing gray sludge just to hide the flaws of an GI pipe.
We saw how this earthly, desaturated aesthetic extended to the very branding and logo design, prompting frustrated fans to literally re-edit the promotional material themselves to restore the lost magic.
The fans did it better.
They really did. And finally, we ended by zooming in on the microscopic, yet narratively vital detail of a character's eye color. We saw how even the smallest deviation from established lore, especially when the technology exists to easily fix it, can signal a massive, trust-breaking disconnect between corporate creators and passionate fans.
It is a staggering amount of cultural fiction to process, single 2-minute, and it leaves us in a really interesting, somewhat precarious place regarding how we consume media. Where do we?
It does leave us at a crossroads, and I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. I want to return to that very first definition we discussed.
The algos.
Exactly. If the root of nostalgia is genuinely algo, if it is fundamentally unavoidably rooted in the pain of loss and the impossibility of return, maybe our entire modern obsession with rebooting and recreating our perfect childhood memories is exactly what makes them impossible to enjoy.
Wow. Okay, unpack that.
Think about it. By using advanced technology to digitally recreate, fix, update, or modernize the past, are we just guaranteeing our own disappointment?
Guess it can never be exactly the same.
Right. Are we demanding that a new group of actors and a new corporate pipeline somehow manufacture a feeling that was actually created by our own youth? We are chasing a feeling of magic that perhaps only existed because we were young, innocent, and unburdened by the baggage of the world when we first experienced it.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's the ultimate question of nostalgia. Can you ever truly go home again? Or does rebuilding the house just remind you that you've grown too big for the room?
That is a heavy, incredibly fascinating thought to carry. The next time you are scrolling through a streaming menu and you click play on a reboot or remake or a legacy sequel, ask yourself, what am I actually trying to watch? Am I looking for a good story, or am I just trying to feel 13 again? We want to thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the media. Keep an eye out for those muddy log files.